The funding for this video is provided by the amazing members of my Patreon. Also contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. Yeah, I started from PBS Kids. What you gonna do? Fight me? Anyway, roll the video. At this point, so many of my videos are becoming video responses to other videos I have made. And today, it's one of those. In a recent video, I tackled the controversial topic of Black love in 2000s animation, pointing out how a significant portion of it was, in my opinion, awful. The portrayal of Black love in animation during that time period was so ass it's not even funny, but I had to laugh because of how ridiculous it was. But reading you all's comments made me wonder if the 2000s were as progressive regarding animation as we think they were. And to be fair, the answer isn't yes nor is it no. It's really fucking complicated. When it comes to animation history as a whole and employment, then the answer is yes. Let's go back to the 1970s. In 1972, the film Fritz the Cat was released. And before I go any further, no one under the age of 18 should be watching this movie. It's rated NC-17 for a reason. Also, I just want to make it clear that this isn't a film I would recommend to anyone, nor do I like it all that much. Fritz the Cat is a film based on the comic strip of the same name by Robert Crumb, whose comics are not for me, I'll say that. Fritz the Cat is a movie about people, more so animals, living in New York City and the culture and nature of the environment that they're in. That's pretty much it because we can't really say if it has a plot. The story frustrates me because it tries to be a social commentary on society, but it bounces around so much, it doesn't give the audience much time to take in anything, which is why so many of its disturbing scenes feel more like shock value opposed to actually, meaning something. Fast forward to the 90s, where Disney Renaissance took place. While I have very strong opinions about the Disney company as a whole, it's a proven fact that 90s Disney films were a contribution to animation being taken more seriously as a medium. Also during the 90s, this was where Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon were born, with many of those shows going over into the 2000s. The 90s were also when adult animation started to become more of a thing. The Simpsons has to be the best example of this because to this day we still cannot escape that show. I would even throw Batman the Animated Series in here just as well. Even though that shit came on Fox Kids, I refuse to believe it's a kid show. As iffy as I am on Fritz the Cat, that movie actually did some good when it came to the subject of animation and progression. Robert Crumb and Ralph Bakshi, yes, y'all did that one thing, okay? I'll give y'all your credit when it's due. But they really pushed the narrative that cartoons can be for adults just as well, therefore making animation more marketable. But in the 1990s, Disney films were different from TV cartoons, including their impact. Why? Mainly because 90s Disney films were made more for everyone in the family to enjoy, as Cartoon Network and Nicktoons made more for the demographic under the age of 10, and as much as we love The Simpsons, that is not a show for kids. Some of these series are an exception though, because they often dealt with mature topics like Hey Arnold, which is one of those shows that carried over into the 2000s. The 2000s was a decade that was able to maintain the success that the 90s had for animation. If not, animation became bigger during these 10 years. While animation became more popular and more accepted, I'm not sure if I can say that about the material that was put into these works. Hey y'all, it's Harriana and I'm back with another video. Hi, hello, how are you doing? My name is Harriana and welcome back to The Pirate Ship, also known as Harry Hook's Pirate Ship. I am the captain, you were not my first mate. I don't got no first mate because you wanna know why? Bring your ear closer to the speaker so you can hear me clearly. No one's worthy of being the first mate. But hi, hello, how are you doing? My name is Harriana and I like to make content based on nostalgia and family and children's entertainment and all the issues I find within those spaces. Now, before we go into today's video, we have some little housekeeping things that we need to go over, because I want you guys to understand what's going on with my channel until I can be able to get this problem solved. So there's a video that me and my friend recorded together. That might be the only face cam video y'all are gonna get from me for probably like 2 to 3 weeks, because you want to know what happened? I ended up leaving my camera battery at his house. Mind you, he was staying at an Airbnb, therefore I can't go back and get it, so my camera battery is gone. Therefore, I am not able to charge my camera and give you all face cam videos. So until I can get me a new charger, which most likely will not be until around the end of June, y'all are going to be getting voiceover videos. But if you want me to make face cam videos and you're generous enough to donate to my Ko-fi to help me get a new charger faster, I would deeply appreciate it. But like I said, it's completely optional. It's not that big of an issue. I have no problem with doing voiceover videos, but I know a lot of y'all really do like the face cam stuff. I enjoy doing the face cam stuff too, but I would just rather prefer to do it voiceover than record on my phone. I can make it work with recording on my phone, but it just takes up too much storage, yada yada yada. So you know what, we're gonna do what we can until then. The next announcement that I have is that here is a coupon for my shop. It is valid until June 9th. It is valid numerous times. You can use it as many times as you would like. harryonhook.com. If you guys don't know, I have a shop where I sell tons and tons and tons of things inspired by things I like. I sell shirts, I sell bonnets. A lot of it is very much giving where nerdy and Y2K meet. So if you are interested in that sale, get the coupon. It's 40% off. Thank you. Now let's actually get into the video for why y'all clicked on it to be here. I asked you all your opinions on what you think if 2000s animation was progressive or not. So what I have done, I have gathered many of you guys' responses. I asked the question here on my YouTube, and I also asked the question on my Instagram too, just as well, because this was a video that I really wanted to get audience input on, mainly because it's a video response to a video I posted a few weeks ago talking about the subject of Black love. I wanted to continue that conversation, but I wanted the community to be a part of that. So for the rest of this video, I will be putting you all's responses on the screen, and I am going to give my thoughts and opinions on them. Mind you, everyone is anonymous, so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So this is how we're gonna go. You guys see that there are 2 or more comments on the screen. I'm going to read the first one and then give my response, and then I'll read the next one and give my response to that. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Stuff from the 2000s, whether it be Y2K or 2010s, has aged horribly. Like, rewatching childhood stuff has me doing double takes left and right, and I'm just wondering if I heard something right. There's always some sort of racist or misogynistic line out of nowhere. This is something that I completely agree with, and it is why I started to make this type of content here on my channel, because I've often gone back and rewatched a lot of the shows from my childhood, but also like I would sit and watch newer stuff and realize that there were not that many issues in the newer things compared to like the old stuff. But also, for those of you guys who don't know, I still am in university. I major in English, but my minor is in African American Studies. I started minoring in African American Studies in 2018, and during that year was when it really kind of woke me up when it comes to how much like racism and misogyny was put in our works. Like, I started taking film courses too around this time just as well, and so many of those courses were us talking about how the film industry did have a big issue with misogyny. But also I was majoring in theater at that time period just as well, and a lot of the playwrights that we would study, they did have big issues with misogyny. And once I started, like, this is something that I've always noticed, like, growing up. But when I actually went off to college, a lot of this stuff was more so in my face, and it was a little bit harder to ignore. And I was like, if I'm seeing this shit, I feel like other people have to see it just as well. And y'all know that's the main reason why I started posting, like, a lot of stuff on my channel, because I wanted to share with you all what I was learning in school, but I wanted to do it with the series that we watched growing up, and it wasn't really talked about all that much. But yeah, that's just something that I have also noticed, and it just is a contribution to so much of the stuff I make. All right, next one is I'd say having the character designs for us look like, well, rather than some minstrel show, I think 2000s animation progressed that. But the writing choices with certain characters honestly did not age well. Trixie from American Dragon, for example, was nice, but I feel like her character struggled with the whole sassy and mean stereotype, which ain't her fault. We already know Disney ain't have much writers in their room in their 2000s animated series. Stuff like that, as well as other harmful stereotypes like, oh, that girl fast as hell, or the disposable black girl trope, among many others, when I wanted to avoid my future series, since black women are a part of the cast and one of the part of the two main protagonists. Overall, 2000s animation progressed, but still has a lot to go with how we depict black men and women, but also Asian people, Hispanic and Latino people, indigenous folks, people who are from Pacific Islanders, and people from the Middle East. Sucks seeing white people who grew accustomed to being everywhere act so bigoted and rude because a person isn't white, isn't able-bodied, isn't neurotypical, isn't cisgender, isn't woman, has different body types, and so on. But history has shown that you can't teach the ignorant who want to remain ignorant. There has always been that percentage who want to be educated and show representation of another group of people. Okay, first of all, I just want to say that you ate down with this response right here. Especially when it comes to, like, people are not going to learn if they don't want to. That is something that I have just had to learn over the years, especially when it comes to, like I mentioned, my African American studies courses. That actually is a part of our classes that they've had to tell us. We're like, there are people in this world that legit don't want to unlearn their ignorant ways, and that has nothing to do with you. I do agree, though, when you're talking about the way 2000s animation treats black girls and black women, because like I said, it's either, oh, that girl fast as hell, or the disposable black girl trope too, just as well. Both of those are two things that make me very uncomfortable. But when I look at the overall, the portrayal of black girls, I've talked about this a lot of times in the past on my channel, because so much of what I talk about in our media has to be the way the black girls are represented in them, because, you know, I'm a black girl. It makes sense for me to talk about that so much. I mentioned how animation really did have a respectability politics issue when it came to the way black girls were able to be portrayed in these cartoons, because I was like, if they were pushed more towards the front, they were made out to be perfect. But if they were flawed, they were pushed more towards the back and they were heavily villainized. Or they were just very much disposable. And when you're talking about how there were other races and ethnic groups that popped up in 2000s animation just as well, I felt as though they feel that just putting these people in the work was enough. They didn't actually care to give these people like voice actors that match. They didn't actually care to give them better storylines. They didn't necessarily care enough to write them outside of harmful stereotypes. It was very much giving, here nigga damn, take what we give you. And as much as I appreciate what 2000s has done for animation as an industry, so much of the representation for marginalized groups feels very much like, here, nigga, damn. But all of this really just goes back to the fact that the writers' rooms in 2000s animation were white as hell. Like, we have to be completely honest with ourselves. There were a few black people sprinkled in here and there. There were a few just people of color sprinkled in there, here and there. But the overall majority was white people making these series. Like, yeah, we have an exception when it comes to the Proud Family, which is another topic that we will get into later, because quite a few of y'all did bring that up. But I'm like, the Proud Family is not the overall. It is a small percentage of everything that came out during that time period. It was very much giving palm colored. I don't think Western animation could be considered a progressive stage until at least Steven Universe came out. I grew up on Nicktoons and Cartoon Network, and many have nasty internalizations, and I had to unlearn that at the time. Even Courage the Cowardly Dog had on-screen domestic. I don't completely agree with this statement. Okay, when it comes to sexuality, I'd say that when Steven Universe came out, it was progressive, but to sit here and act as if it wasn't progressive with other things, I would have to say is, I don't want to say It's kind of like turning the blind eye towards everything else that went into this entire industry. I will always sit here and talk about how 2000s animation has a big issue when it comes to homophobia. That is something that many of you have pointed out, by the way, when I was talking about this. There are so many annoying homophobic jokes when I go back and look at so many of these older cartoons. And it's not that these are jokes that we're seeing in adult animation. This is shit that we're seeing in family animation. And I do think Steven Universe did a good job when it came to, like, you know, removing so much of the homophobia that went into these works. But saying that it wasn't progressive until that show came out is something that I don't completely agree with, because Steven Universe is a series. Mind you, I'm not a fan of Steven Universe. I've only ever watched the first season of it, and many of you guys have been asking me over and over again if I would make videos about Steven Universe, and the answer is just no. I respect Steven Universe. A lot of my friends are really interested in the series just as well, but it is just something that I just don't really have interest in, and that's okay. But there are plenty of other series that came out before Steven Universe, I'd say progress in ways that Steven Universe did not. I also would like to mention, when it comes to South Asian characters, I'd say Steven Universe was progressive just as well when it comes to Connie, because the portrayal of South Asian characters in series before Steven Universe was very much questionable. But when it comes to the portrayal of Black people, no, it's a no for me. And also, there are numerous other series I'd say that came out before Steven Universe that really did handle the concept of family very well. I would say that Rugrats and All Grown Up is one of those shows. As Steven Universe did do a lot of good when it comes to the way we view sexuality and animation, I wouldn't say that that show is what contributed to so much change, because it's just not true. And I don't want this to come off across as like me being like harsh about Steven Universe. Mind you, I feel like I can't be harsh about Steven Universe because I've never seen the show in full. I've only seen the first season, and seeing how much came after that was a lot. But I do want to sit here and acknowledge that there were numerous other things that happened with animation before the show came out. Next, there's a lot of things I could say, but the issue most relevant to me is the complete lack, both then and now, of Middle Eastern characters. Like, I literally cannot name a single one off the top of my head. I guess Cleo from Clone High would count, but I'm pretty sure history is kind of complicated. She's more ancestrally Greek. I agree, because I don't even think I can name any Middle Eastern characters either. When it comes to representation and Western animation, it is still very much white-centered. But also when it comes to marginalized groups, it's a lot harder for these people to get their foot in the door. And one thing that I have noticed that a lot of people don't want to sit and talk about is that colorism and featureism do play into part when it comes to off-screen jobs. Because somebody got mad at me, but I pointed out something about how a lot of well-known Black voice actors, or voice actors that are Black and are starting to get a lot more work, a lot of them are light-skinned or of lighter skin. And I look at so many of these writers' rooms like throughout the years, and so many of the people are light-skinned and are lighter skinned. You even look at corporate America and they show you like the people that are on their teams, the staff beside them. A lot of them are of lighter skin and have more smaller features. There are so many issues behind the scenes when it comes to making things that a lot of people don't seem to talk about, because they feel like these issues only play a part when it comes to on screen, because we often don't really see Middle Eastern actors in our works either. But behind the scenes, a lot of those people are still struggling to get jobs. It's really just a lack of inclusion. And also, there is a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to not just the animation industry, but the film industry as a whole. Because I completely agree. I still cannot think of a Middle Eastern character. Like, I thought Cleo from Monster High, but I don't even want to say I'm too sure about that. All right, next. 2000s animation for the most part wasn't progressive. So many issues and barely Black mains, let alone Black couples. Oh, I completely agree. This is a comment that a lot of y'all mentioned. I was talking about black love and animation, and y'all were mentioning interracial couples, and was like, I thought this couple was portrayed well, and I was like, y'all, we got a long way to go, because black love means love between two black people. Usually when it comes to like a couple where like one of the characters is black, it is portrayed better. That is one thing that I have noticed, because the relationship with Danny and Valerie and Danny Phantom was portrayed much better than whatever the fuck she had going on with Tucker. And I really just feel as that contribute to the fact that there were not that many black people in the writers' rooms at the time, because I am aware that there was a black person in the writers' room for Danny Phantom, but you have one black person out of how many white people? How many white people on the team specifically? That is one thing a lot of people don't seem to get, because when we're talking about the subject of diversity, you'll be like, oh, we have this one black person here, and then the rest of the team is white. I'm like, this ain't enough. As a total drama fan, I must admit 99% of the jokes across all 6 seasons of the show, and a few of the characters from all 3 generations we got, not counting the Amazing Race spinoff and the reboot that is airing this year, because this year and the Amazing Race spinoff came out in 2015, have not aged quite well, to the point where I don't see 99% of the characters from any generation be able to return without major changes to them. Edit, to be specific, a trans person, I must say all transgenders troll jokes and TDA was wild. And as a bi and demi romantic person, any joke making fun of characters like Owen, Cody, and Noah imply anything about them being gay or bi. Listen, I love total drama, okay? I love the first season Total Drama Island, and I love the 3rd season Total Drama World Tour. But when I say that this show most definitely is a product of its time, it truly is. Because I went back and I rewatched Total Drama Action, and there was so much transphobia in it. Like, it was making me uncomfortable. But it's not even just issues with transphobia that went into Total Drama. There was so many issues with racism because of what they did with Lashana, but also misogyny. Total Drama has become one of those things that I love, but I cannot ethically recommend, because there are so many issues in this show, and there are issues that I am against. And I understand that Total Drama is supposed to be satire of reality television, and pretty much all the characters are based on stereotypes and tropes that we will often see within the series. But mind you, a lot of the jokes fall flat, and there often aren't any nuances in them. Listen, I love Total Drama, I get it, but it often gives panty and stocking with Gardevel when watching it. And then the next part of this didn't age well. Lots of casual misogyny or fat phobia or thinly veiled transphobia. Honestly, it's a lot of the humor that just hasn't aged well just as well. Yeah, transphobia was a big thing, and not just 2000s cartoons, but like 2000s kids shows too, just as well. Because I remember there was a transphobic joke in Drake and Josh when I had went back and rewatched it a few years ago. But fat phobia has to be a big one. Total Drama is a series I say that has a problem with fat phobia. Fat phobia is not just a problem with Western animation, by the way. Anime has such a big problem when it comes to fat phobia just as well. Fat phobia is so casual when it comes to animation that it's even a problem on freaking PBS Kids. If you guys have ever watched PBS Kids, you know the series Arthur. Arthur is one of those shows I feel like that has aged well mostly, but they up in there had fat jokes about Binky. Like, yes, they were making fat jokes about Binky in the show. And about Binky, he is terrible, he sucks, he's annoying, he didn't deserve that. There's actually an amazing YouTuber on this platform named Rowan Elise, and she basically talked about how kid shows have a fat phobia problem. And I was like, this isn't just an animation problem, it is a family entertainment issue. And I understand the importance of eating healthy and working out, but it gets to a point where y'all are literally making fun of anybody that doesn't have 0 to 2% body fat on them. Like in 2000s animation, it was so casual just to make fun of big people. And then going back to the thing about casual misogyny, the main reason so many of these shows from the 2000s have issues with misogyny is because most of the people in those writers' rooms were cishet men. That's literally the answer. Because someone said something about, do you ever look back at a female character that you hated growing up and you realize the problem with her is that she was written by a bunch of men? That's usually the issue with so many of these shows. When I say that 2000s writers' room for animation were not diverse, they were not very diverse at all. Because like I said, there were barely any people of color in those writers' room, but most of those writers' rooms didn't even have women in them. Most of them were men. And then usually if there were women in them, they'd be white women. I think it was progressive for what was considered progressive at the time. Not 100% by today's standard, but it was a start in some ways depending on the show. Like the OG Proud Family has issues, but it was overall net positive with some of its shortcomings. I'd say that the Proud Family is one of those shows that many of us have looked back on and we're like, there were so many problems here. But if you remember that a lot of the people who helped make the Proud Family, they also helped make Bebe's Kids, and Bebe's Kids has problems in that just as well. And I noticed a lot of those overlapping issues were in the Proud Family. The Proud Family is a show that I think is very much valid of a lot of the criticisms that people give about it, because the show does have issues with misogynoir despite the fact that the main character is a black girl. The show does have issues with colorism. Colorism has to be one of the major factors that a lot of people have been talking about when it comes to this show, especially in regards to Dejanay's character. I talked a bit about that in my video about Black Love, you know, the one as this is a video response to. But I mentioned something about how Penny was seen as the girl, like the light-skinned girl that all the guys liked, and then she had her dark-skinned friend that always threw herself at a guy that didn't want her. And I think what made it worse is the fact that the guy that she had a crush on was dark-skinned too, and he was just very much like nasty towards her. It was colorism all around. And hearing the way Penny's family would talk about Dejanay was very disheartening, on top of the fact that Oscar was dark-skinned himself just as well. The colorism in the original Proud Family makes me uncomfortable. But mind you, the Proud Family came out in the 2000s. If you guys have watched a lot of 2000s black sitcoms, live action black sitcoms by the way, many of them are not too far off when it comes to the way black people are portrayed in those shows. As much as I enjoy 90s and 2000s black sitcoms, many of them do have issues with colorism. And sometimes these shows would try to tackle the subject of colorism in the episodes, and it would often fall flat because the newer Proud Family tried to tackle the subject of colorism, and the attempt was there, but it could have been handled better in my opinion. But in a sense, I say that the original Proud Family was progressive because we finally got a television show about a black girl that was made by black people. On top of the fact that her voice actor is black just as well. And I will go ahead and say that Kyla Pratt and Penny Proud favor each other. And if anyone's ever watched 101, the same show that Kyla Pratt was working on at the same time as she did the Proud Family, the shows were very similar. As much as I love 101, I will sit here and say that the show hasn't aged well in many aspects just as well. But the original Proud Family honestly is a portrayal of how black people in the 2000s were. As someone who grew up in the 2000s and grew up in like a predominantly black environment, colorism and fat phobia were two things in our community that were big issues. But also the Proud Family introduced me to so many new things. Like I literally learned about Ramadan from the Proud Family. I learned about the concept of money and spending through this series. I was able to learn so much about the world and culture through watching the Proud Family, and I felt a bit normalized, I say, just as well, because a lot of the characters look like me and the people I was in community with. But that writer's room for the Proud Family, honestly, is just a big reflection of the problems that we have within the Black community that we still to this day need to take care of. There have been improvements, but there are still so many people that still have these same views. The studios often gave more range to animators then versus now. In some cases, yes, but it really depends on the individual creators and teams. That I agree with, because you look at so many of these shows that came out from the 2000s, and some of them do handle the subjects of, race or misogyny or whatever it was trying to teach to the audience well, while others failed tremendously. One 2000s animated series I'd say that aged well, mostly overall, would have to be Avatar: The Last Airbender. And a lot of us were talking about how we ain't never seen another show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, specifically with Western animation. When it comes to 2000s animation and Avatar, I say that one right there was progressive as hell when it came to the material that was put out in it. But also, we have to take into account that a majority of the voice cast was white people, despite the fact that there were not any white people in this series. On top of the fact that so many of the people behind the scenes of this show were white just as well, despite this being a show about people of color, it made me think of that entire thing where we were talking about how there are so many picture books, children's picture books, that are about people of color, but then we turn around and we find out the people behind the said work were white people. But one thing I will always applaud about Avatar: The Last Airbender is that you can tell that there was a lot of care put into the work. But then there are still factors about Avatar: The Last Airbender that showed, yeah, white people made this. And I noticed with the new Avatar, mind you, I have no interest in watching that new live action Avatar: The Last Airbender series. They're wanting to make those improvements when it came to the insensitivities that went into them, and also trying to be more accurate when it comes to matching the actors with the characters that they're playing. There still are issues with colorism there, I'd say that. But Avatar is one of those series from the 2000s I did think was very much progressive, especially with the way that, like I said, there was no white people in the show, and almost every animated series out here that we had at that time period had white people in it. The Proud Family even had white people in it. One of the main characters was white. But even then, when I go back and look at so many 2000s animated series, especially ones that I love and hold near and dear to my heart, there are still things about them that did not age well. As much as I love All Grown Up, the show doesn't have an issue with race. I think in some cases it was more progressive risky than current animation. Okay, this right here applies to the Walt Disney Animation Studios. This is something that I think applies there heavily, especially when it comes to its villains. Because everyone was talking about how we're high-key tired of the twist villain shit that Disney has been doing with their movies, but also they haven't been, having much of a villain either. They either have a twist villain, or they'll have a villain that just isn't a villain. The villain is society or it's family trauma or whatnot, which are stories that are important and do need to be told. I think this was handled very well on the subject of Turning Red, but even then, Turning Red didn't have an antagonistic character. It had a school bully in it. I think Turning Red was very progressive, I'd say, but it also talked a lot about things that we didn't really see much in animation. But that is one of the Disney films I think did a better job of being progressive in this day and age. But a lot of people were talking about how they are kind of irritated with the way Disney is portraying the big bad in their films now. And I most definitely agree. I was going off about this because I mentioned that there are a lot of issues that went into making a lot of the classic Disney villain characters, such as fat phobia, ageism, misogyny. Anti-Semitism has to be a very big one too, just as well. And I even throw in a tad bit of homophobia and fat phobia too there just as well. But one thing about the Disney villains is that if you remove all of those factors about them, they were genuinely awful people. They were awful people. They were amazing villains. And I'll sit here and I throw Clayton into that. Clayton was the villain in Tarzan. I say that he's one of the villains that I say that all of those things don't apply to, and he was still just an awful, despicable human being, and he got in the end. He was just a horrible fucking person. I feel like Disney is afraid to go there all the way with just making their villains awful fucking people again. And I'd say that this was my biggest pet peeve when it came to Big Hero 6. Everybody that knows me knows that I adore the film Big Hero 6, but I do have some notes about the way the villain was portrayed in that movie. The villain was Callahan. He was like an older white man, and the movie sets him up to be like a nice dude. And then next thing you know, we think he's dead because there was an accident that happened at the university. And next thing you know, we find out he's alive and that he faked his death and he ended up taking the life of Tadashi because of this, this thing that he had done. Well, yes, I can sit here and understand the nuances of this, where it's like, okay, this man pretends to be nice and he tricks the audience into thinking that he's sweet, he's a good person, but it's not that he tricks the audience into thinking this, he tricks his surroundings too just as well, because pretty much everyone at the school had good things to say about him. Pretty much everyone in the environment of San Francisco didn't have anything bad to say about Callahan. He was very much well liked. But then we find out that he goes and he's over here doing some mad scientist type shit. And I do appreciate in Big Hero 6, the series, we get to see his ass in jail. Like, yes, great. And we see how Hero was talking about how he's not sure if he can ever forgive Callahan because he is responsible for his brother's death. But that being said, I was just like, can we go back to the villain being awful from the fucking beginning, please? Because as much as I appreciate the way Callahan's story was told, Disney done did this thing 3 times already. We done did this too many times already. This was when Disney was starting to move away from having a villain or us knowing who the villain is from the beginning. And the most funny thing about the way Disney did this trick villain is that they tried to fool the audience into thinking that this man was dead for the longest, and then next thing you know, he comes back. While Big Hero 6 is one of Disney's darker films because the entire subject of the movie just is like grief and death and whatnot, and how people are grieving and responding to Tadashi's death. Like I said, this was always one of my favorite movies, like in my last year of high school, and it still is one of my favorite Disney films to this day. But I will go ahead and sit and tell you now that if the villain was bad from the beginning, things would have been a lot more darker, and I think it would have affected the story a little bit differently too. But like I said, I feel as though animation was not afraid to get dark back in like the 90s and even the 2000s, because I'll even sit here and say that Atlantis the Lost Empire is a very dark Disney film. I'd even say that Treasure Planet was a very dark Disney film just as well. Lilo and Stitch was so fucking sad. And then later on, Disney, it was just like, okay, we did a little bit too much with being dark. Let's try to be a little bit lighthearted and be a little bit more for everyone. And this is why I say that Disney low-key needs to move away from trying to make movies for everybody now. Because I sit and I talk about how Disney took a big risk when it came to not just Hercules, but also The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Because those 2 movies handle the subjects of lust, misogyny, and just violence very, very well. But then again, you look at the stuff that came out after it, it's like, okay, can we keep taking risks back then like we did now? I personally think Big Hero 6 would have been a much stronger film if they took more risk with the way they portrayed death and grief, with the villain specifically. I'd say that Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon started to take more risk after the 2000s in animation, but Disney, like the films, the theatrical Disney animated movies, they started taking less risk. That is it for today's video. I'm gonna go ahead and stop it right here. I don't know, it's something like when my videos are lengthy like this, I prefer to like be on camera and it's not me just reading comments and responding and all of that. I prefer to be a little bit more visual going on. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. It feels good to be back. I've been away because I went to MomoCon this year and it was great. And then also I am getting ready to go to another con. I'm going to BlurCon this year and I'm super duper excited. That's why I'm just like stressed out right now, because I'm trying to make sure I'm prepared enough to make sure I have everything I need for when I go there. But I'm super duper excited. I'm gonna have a panel and I cannot wait to meet everyone there. I've been wanting to go to BlurCon for a while, but I'm finally going. But yeah, the coupon for my shop up on the screen right now, valid until June 9th. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day, night, or whatever time you chose to watch this video. I'm just thankful that you watched it with the ads on. Alright, thank you. Have a good night.